There was this girl named Anne. Now, Anne said every year her family would get together at her grandmother's house in Arizona. And she said this particular Thanksgiving was going to be very special because her Uncle Jerry was going to be there. Now, her Uncle Jerry had disappeared for some years. No one knew really what happened to him, but they somehow had reconnected and they were going to bring him to Thanksgiving. So she gets to her grandmother's house and, they're having a good time. And she said she just remembered the energy in the home just being really happy and like loving. Well, all of a sudden, she hears a knock at the door. And when they open the door, she could see a couple of her uncles, and behind them is her Uncle Jerry. And she said immediately when her uncle walked into the house, the energy changed. And she said she just got this very bad feeling like something was wrong. Now, her uncle, she said, had, this very long, shaggy hair, this thick, beard with grays in it. His clothes were kind of, wrinkly and disheveled, and he, looked like he'd been through a rough time. Her grandma says to her, like, go give your Uncle Jerry a hug. You haven't seen him in years. So she, slowly makes her way to Jerry, puts her arm around him, and she said she just remembered he had this very distinct, very bad smell to him. And she said she just couldn't put her mind on like what that smell was. So this whole time during Thanksgiving, she said, her Uncle Jerry was just very quiet, had this blank stare on his face, and just wouldn't really socialize with anyone. And she said when they sat down for dinner at the table, she remembered her Uncle Jerry was down at the end, and he was just looking off, like into nothing. And she remembered him turning his head slowly and locking eyes with her. And she knew at that moment, like, she felt like he saw that she was looking at him and like he was inside of her head. So she, just tries to shake that thought and starts, talking to some of her family. But something about that encounter just made her feel uncomfortable. So after dinner and dessert, her uncles and her Uncle Jerry, they all leave. And she said, every year she would stay the night with her grandmother and help her clean up after Thanksgiving. So they get done cleaning and everything, and they decide to go to bed for the night. She makes her way back to the spare bedroom, and she gets into bed. She's watching TV, when all of a sudden, she said she hears a sound like coming from out in the hallway. And then she said she heard like a clinking sound. So she gets up out of bed and she starts walking down the hallway. She says, Grandma, is that you? Grandma? No one says anything. As she goes out into the living room, she can hear the sound is coming from the basement. And she said it was just this very odd sound. She goes to the basement door. She opens it. And she said, like, there was no light switch, so it was completely dark. And the only way to turn on a light was to go down these stairs and pull like a pull string light. So she starts making her way down these steps. And she said all of a sudden she heard what sounded like a dog growling. And when she looks in the darkness, she sees two yellow eyes staring at her. So she turns around really fast, makes her way up the stairs, but she slips on one of the steps. And all of a sudden, as she looks down the stairs, she sees what looks like her Uncle Jerry, but it wasn't him. And she said he was walking on all fours, and he was, kind of contorted as he walked, and he starts making his way up the stairs. And the whole time he's kind of growling like a dog. So she runs up the stairs, she closes the door, she locks it, and she runs into her grandmother's room. She wakes up her grandma and is like, Grandma, we got to get out of the house. There's something wrong with Uncle Jerry. He's down in the basement, like acting weird, like we have to leave. And her grandma goes, honey, what are you talking about? What do you mean your Uncle Jerry's down in the basement? And she goes, Uncle Jerry, like he's acting weird. He's down there. And her grandma goes, that's ridiculous, honey. Your uncles took Uncle Jerry, back home. Like he's hours away from here. Like he is not in the basement. So she gets up and she goes, I'll prove it to you. So she goes all the way to the basement door. She opens it up. They go downstairs. She turns on the light. There's no one there. And so her grandmother brings her up into the kitchen and says, let me, make you something to drink, kind of calm you down. She said right at that moment, she looked out the sliding glass doors and she sees a coyote run by. And she said it clicked in her mind, that smell that her Uncle Jerry had. It was the smell of like a dog, a wet dog.